Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on conducting mixed analyses, a general typology from Onwit Boozy et al. 2007. So today, this afternoon, we want to be able to delineate various definitions of integration, discuss the dimensions of integration, and also explore the typology of mixed analysis techniques. And under mixed analysis techniques, we'll be looking at what is the fundamental principle of a mixed analysis, the matrix that is involved in mixed analysis, the steps to conduct a mixed analysis, and the rationale and purpose for conducting mixed analyses. So first, let's talk about some of the definitions of integration in mixed method research. And we have the authors here, Morse and Niehaus, who describe integration, the concept of integration, as mixing and also as a point of interface. Creswell et al. Also speaks to points of interface. Plano Clark and Ivankova speaks about integration or mixing. It's an explicit interrelating of the quantitative and qualitative components of the study. Baisley also states that integration can occur, it can be said to occur to the extent that different data elements and various strategies for analysis of those elements are combined throughout a study, produces findings greater than the sum of the parts. Maxwell, Chimil, and Rogers state that integration is understanding and achieving that qualitative and quantitative approach, its methods and data. Fetters and Molina Azarin say that integration is the linking of qualitative and quantitative approaches and dimensions together to create a new whole or a more holistic understanding than achieved by either alone. So from this, we want to pull out the key terms here. We want to talk about mixing, points of interface, linking, combining, and so on. So visually, we can visualize, we can represent integration when we look at colors. For instance, if we mix the color red by itself, it's one, it's a whole, and yellow by itself, one, it's a whole, we can get a new something here, which a new color like orange. So too, if we mix yellow and blue, we're gonna get green. If we look at how to make akra, now when I was in St. Lucia, I would have eaten lots of akra. I love akra. You combine ingredients here to make something, right? If we look at a smoothie, another thing that I love is smoothies, a nice protein-based smoothie. You blend up, you link, you mix, you combine, and you get a whole new something, right? So this is what we're talking about when we talk about integration. Now, mathematically, we can represent or we can put forward some equation frameworks, and Fetters 2018 speaks about the 1 + 1 = 3 framework. And what is the 1 + 1 = 3? Now we know 1 + 1 is really equals 2 mathematically, but when we're talking mixed method research, we're talking about that integrated approach that gives the added value. It's something that yields a whole greater than the sum of the individual parts. As we go back to the example, you'll understand here when we talk about the mixing of colors, you get a new whole. So in mixed methods, we want to get that added value. We want to get that other whole, that greater whole sum that's greater than the sum of the individual parts. So the framework we want to stay away from would be the 1 + 1 = 2. And what does this mean? This is basically conducting mixed qualitative and quantitative data collection without the integration. So therefore, the sum is no more than the independent parts. So that would be a quant independent study, a qual independent study, and really no greater or no added value towards the study. So we want to think pragmatically in terms of when we're conducting mixed method research, we want to focus on the 1 + 1 = infinity. And what does that mean? It means that there are countless possibilities for integrating qualitative and quantitative procedures together in mixed method programs of research. And Mertens 2016, he speaks about the kaleidoscope. So we want to think about, when we're thinking about integration mixed methods, it's that the world of mixed method research is in some ways like a kaleidoscope, meaning that's myriad of possibilities, that mixed method can provide opportunities for us to see things that have not been seen, right? But we also want to take into consideration that opportunities for mixing can never be fully anticipated at the onset of the study, right? We want to be open-minded for the countless possibilities that integration can yield in terms of the qual and quant procedures. So now that we've spoken about integration and we've seen that, we want to think pragmatically, we want to be open to integration, that we can have integration across all levels. And that brings us to the research integration trilogy. And what is this? This simply here shows us integration at the center, the core, and there are different dimensions we can integrate across. In this example here, Fetters speaks about the trilogy and the integration challenge. So we have three. We have methodologically, philosophically, and your methods. So let's look at the dimensions of integration. And Tedley and Tasha Corey would have spoken about stages, whereas Fetters and Molina Azurin propose dimensions of the mixed methods research integration trilogy. So the first dimension we want to look at would be the philosophical dimension. And what does this entail? This means that you can simply integrate through your philosophical dimension in terms of your pragmatism, critical realism, and so on. If we look at the theoretical dimension, you can integrate in terms of incorporating some kind of broad framework theory, for example, your feminist theory, and so on. If we look at the literature review, you can also integrate here in terms of bringing that the how and why about a phenomenon, producing that new knowledge from your extensive literature review. In terms of sampling, we can also integrate in terms of the relationship of the quant and qual data sources. If we look at data collection, you can also integrate here in terms of collecting both types of data. In your data analysis, you can also integrate here in terms of using some kind of intro method or an advanced mixed method analysis, such as the joint displays and the qualitative comparative analysis and so on. So the data analysis brings us in terms of integration towards a mixed analysis typology that's proposed by Onweg-Buzzi et al. 2007. So what is mixed methods data analysis? According to Tedley and Tasha Coring, mixed method data analysis involves the process whereby quant and qual data analysis strategies are combined, connected, or integrated in research studies. And earlier on, we would have seen examples where we spoke about combining, mixing, and linking. So what is the fundamental principle of a mixed analysis? The fundamental principle is that a mixed analysis involves the use of quant and qual analytical techniques that are utilized either concurrently or sequentially sometime after the data collection process, from which interpretations are made either in a parallel, integrated, or an iterative manner. And what we can take out from this fundamental principles here, we're looking at the sequence, your timing, the technique, and the design, and so on. Now, Onweg-Buzzi et al. Propose a matrix, and in this matrix, there are certain decisions we must consider. So there are 4 decisions we want to consider. The first one would be that the researcher must determine the number of data types that will be analyzed. So for example, for quant, you'll have your survey, questionnaire, and so on. For qual, your interviews, and so on. So the number of data types. Secondly, the researcher would want to determine the data analysis type that you intend to use. Also, the researcher must decide whether the qual and quant will be carried out concurrently or sequentially. Here we're talking about timing and sequencing. And lastly, the researcher must determine whether equal status will be given or which strand is prioritized. So before we move towards the matrix, we must first understand some of these, what I call meta terms, that we need to understand in order to understand the matrix. So we have 2 broad categories here, the data types and the data analysis type. Under data types, they use the term monotype. Now, what does monotype mean? Monotype here, it means that it's one type of data. So for example, you would have your quant data or your qual data only for one sample. In a multi-type data set, you'll have both data types that are used, and it's for 2 or more samples. Next, the second broad category, your data analysis types. Under data analysis, you can have a mono analysis, which is a quant analysis only, or a qual analysis only. And we all know that mono here means one. Multi, more than one, a multi-analysis. It's analysis that involves both quant and qual types of analyses. So let's take a look at the matrix now. The matrix, we have the number of analysis types, which is 2, 1, 1, and the number of data types, which is 1 and 2 as well. This is why they call it a 2 by 2 matrix here. So it's divided into 4 cells. You have cell 1, cell 2, cell 3, and cell 4. So cell 1 and cell 2 is not really pertinent to us in terms of mixed method, but I will still just touch on it a bit. So cell 1 speaks to a monotype mono analysis, where you can either have a complete quant, which is a quantitative study, or a complete qual, which is a completed qualitative study. For cell 2, this deals with a multi-type mono analysis. So what they're saying is that this type should be avoided because you have 2 data types and 1 analysis method. You can either have an incomplete quant or an incomplete qual. So the analysis here, it is not mixed due to the assumption that qual data cannot be analyzed using quant techniques. So therefore, 1 data type will not be analyzed. Hence, they call it the incomplete quant and qual. In cell 3, where we have the monotype mixed analyses, because both analytic techniques are used, this can yield us 3 types of studies, where we have the quantitative dominant monotype mixed analysis, qualitative dominant monotype mixed analysis, or the equal status monotype. So analysis of 1 data type using both quant and qual analyses, we refer to that as the monotype mixed analysis. In the first analysis, we want to try to directly match your data type with your data statistics if you're using a quant data statistics. Here we also want to talk about qualitizing and quantitizing. You quantize qualitative data and you qualitize quant data. This was proposed by Tedley and Tashikori in 1998. In cell 4, which should be our main focus, which is our main focus here because this deals directly with mixed method, it can yield us 6 or maybe even more than 6. Some authors would have shown us more than 6 different types of multi-type mixed analyses. You can have a quantitative dominant sequential multi-type mixed analysis. It's multi-type because both data types using both analysis type, and it's also mixed. Now here we want to remember our notation system from Creswell, where you would know the arrow in terms of sequence, and if it's caps and common, which one is being prioritized here. So both cell 3 and cell 4 can be expanded to include iterative data analysis techniques. Yep. So we want to go into the data analysis steps, and these steps that are involved for a mixed method study is really 7 steps. Some of these steps would be only like the first 3, you could see it happening only in cell 1 and cell 2, but because we're dealing with cell 4, all the steps would be relevant, all the steps will be pertinent. So the first one we have is data reduction. What do we mean by data reduction? This is really reducing your dimensionality of your quant data, right? And how can you do that? How you reduce it for teams and so on for qualitative data? How do we display our data? Next, you want to data display. You can visually do that by using tables, graphs, or charts, and so on. From your display, you want to transform your data. You can do that by quantitizing some narrative data. You can qualitize your numeric data. After, you want to correlate your data. So you're correlating your qual data with your quantitized data and vice versa. Next, we want to consolidate our data. What does that mean? It means both your quant and qual data combined to create some sort of new codes. Then you want to compare your data. So by comparing the findings from the qual, you're going to compare them, the qual and quant data analyses. And lastly, data integration is where both your qual and your quant findings are integrated into a coherent whole, or you can have 2 separate data sets. So let's look at linking the mixed analysis stage to the mixed analysis matrix. And here you can see we have 4 cells yet again. And in the first one, we have a monotype monoanalysis. This means it's a within paradigm analysis because only one type of data is collected and only one type of analysis is done. So what stage is important here? You have data reduction, data display. In cell 2, it's the same, data reduction, data display. For cell 3, you have a monotype mixed analysis, where it's between paradigm and an analysis, means using an analysis technique to qualitize. So we have an added step here, which is data transformation. You can data transformation through conversion. Here, this is really the hallmark for this cell. So it's between paradigm analysis where only one type of data is collected. In cell 4 is what we also want to pay attention to. It's your multi-type mixed analysis, and this involves all 7 steps. So cell 4 yields the most rigorous and in-depth analysis, and this is what we want to accomplish. So this is the cell we want to pay attention to because it's both between paradigms and within paradigm analysis. So this is just an example I pulled out from my Mmr study where I would have used the MaxQDA, and you can see here where we the data. Let me see if I could make this bigger. You can see the number, the codes, and the percentage. So it's really quantitizing your qual data here, right? Your code frequencies. So we want to end by talking about significance enhancement, right? And this is similar to what Green et al. Would have proposed in her 5 purposes for conducting your mixed method study. So significant enhancement is one of the 4 major rationales for mixing quantitative and qualitative approaches, and this is also integrated into Green et al.'s 5 purposes. So it's really here enhancing your interpretation of your data, and we would have seen the 5 reasons, the 5 purposes: complementarity, expansion, development, and so on. So cell 4, again, we're going to pay attention to triangulation, complementarity, development, initiation, and expansion. So to conclude, we want to look at what Onwegbuzi is saying. He's saying being aware of the type of data that has been collected, identifying the purpose, the significance, enhancement, and relationship between these can increase the depth of analysis and increase the rigor of the study. So to conclude, I have 2 pictures here. We have one from rituals, one from Starbucks. And you were thinking, what does this have to do with mixed method research? So it goes back to the mixing, to which one you prefer. For me, I'm a rituals person because I like the way that whatever methods they use. In my opinion, I find that their smoothie tastes way better than what Starbucks have. It could be whatever they're using, we don't know, to come up with their shakes, right? The chocolate mocha. So I just wanted to end by saying, we want to think about integration as that greater added value to our study. Yeah? And that's the end.
Thank you, Sister Ramona. Any questions, class? Feel free.
One. So Ramona, I saw that you got 7. It was 7 steps